In this video, we're going to take a look at the available options for Wacom Bridge.
So this is a Wacom Center on the remote system, so it doesn't allow us to make any changes. So there's a button here to open up Wacom Center locally. Now that we have that here, you can see that there's a Wacom Bridge tab, so we can click the tab.
You can see here that we are indeed connected to our remote environment.
Underneath Bridge connection status is local screen cursor. The local screen cursor is displayed by the Wacom driver on the local computer and follows the pen tip with no delay. So for longer and slower connections, having this on may be useful, but generally I find that turning this off is best for my workflows. Underneath local screen cursor is Wacom Inkline. Inkline is really the magic behind Bridge in my opinion. Inkline is a stroke generated to bridge the gap between local pen tip and remote cursor. Even with excellent connection, there will always be some level of latency. Inkline helps bridge that gap to help users focus on the creative work rather than get distracted by potential performance issues. There are a few aspects to customizing your Inkline experience. Of course, there's a toggle to disable Inkline altogether, but of course we're going to keep that on. Beneath the toggle for Show Inkline is the fade time. So that's the length of time that the actual Inkline stays on your display before disappearing and revealing the stroke data behind it. So for longer, slower connections, a longer fade time might be more useful. I generally like to stay in the 100 to 110 range. Under fade time is a toggle for pressure sensitivity. So this changes between the option of a consistent width to the Inkline or a pressure sensitive, sort of a tapered stroke relative to how you're pressing down on the screen itself. So I like to leave that on, but we'll look at that later when we start laying down strokes. The last two options are brush size and line color. So I have this set up to a 12 pixel brush in black. I generally like to replicate the tool that I'm using to sketch in. So as I lay down some strokes, you might see Inkline. My goal with these settings is to sort of hide it or camouflage the Inkline into my brush stroke so I'm not really noticing it as I work. But it's a thicker line, just ever so slightly thicker, that disappears as the stroke ends. So I'm gonna be jumping back and forth to the local Wacom Center quite a bit, so I'm gonna exit full screen and pull up the local Wacom Center. So I'm gonna turn off Inkline altogether just to see any sort of difference in performance. Now this connection is phenomenal, so there's not much to complain about here. It's more than fast enough for me to get my work done. But with Inkline, it just takes that to the next level. So I'm gonna go back in, turn that back on. With the longer fade time, the Inkline stroke will stay up longer as I'm sketching. I may not need that because my connection is so fast and performant, but the Inkline is showing itself longer on my local display and then fading out over time. Next, I want to turn off pressure sensitivity. So this is where you can start noticing a difference on how the Inkline is actually looking. So it's a consistent width. There's no taper to it as it fades off. If we go in and make the brush size a little bit bigger, and slide this up to an orange, now we'll really start to notice the Inkline as it's happening, and the resulting stroke with my black brush is showing up afterwards. So we got a long Inkline that stays on screen for quite a bit of time. Now we can go back and sort of slowly revert back to how we had things before. I'm gonna go all the way to a short fade time, so it's just a little blip, right? And you can see that there's no gap between the stroke and that Inkline because my performance is so good, that fade time is not super necessary to get the results I'm looking for. I do like to live in the 100 area. That's generally where I like to be. I'm gonna toggle pressure sensitivity. So now you can see that that stroke's more dynamic and looks a lot like what I'm trying to accomplish with the brush stroke itself. Lastly, I'm gonna go back to my 12 pixel brush and take that back down to black. And then we can see that it really does look like the brush I'm using. So really, really fast. Works for big swooping strokes and cross-hatching as well for shading workflows. These are the settings to sort of customize your workflow, make sure it's optimized for your performance, and you get the most out of your connection with Wacom Bridge. So thanks very much for watching. We really hope that you enjoy your experience with Wacom Bridge. And if you have any issues or concerns, please reach out to our support team. Thanks again.